implementing file and print services. Whoa, 20 minutes. I believe. All right, so Gesundheit. Whoa, breaking it. Who found the coffee pot?
I did.
Oh, where was it?
Oh.
Yeah, we gotta make sure we clean this foot back, so.
Oh, I already asked. I asked Scott where it was at. They didn't bring it to Starbucks.
If you see a tape outline on the floor,
And if safety comes to us, it's very bad to keep that being careful.
I don't know. Put it in the classroom.
My second youngest has the worst nosebleed, and this morning he didn't even hold his nose, they let it bleed all over the bathroom.
Oh,
And I sent a picture to my wife. She said, how much I asked for it.
bad. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, all right. So, yeah, so we are on 10 because last week we did 9 and we did 8 today. And I couldn't remember, did we talk about this one at all or did we finish with 9? I think we. All right, so this is something we have been.
We didn't talk about the site involvement. What about the That's about sort of
Okay. We'll start here just to get caught up.
You were really tired that day.
That's right. They kept putting a feather under your nose, see if you would wake up. You know, you keep snoring and. All right, so implementing file and print services. Even though this is a new chapter, it has come up in our discussions an awful lot. So when you think of file and print services, what's kind of your first thought?
Well, file-wise, I'm looking at sharing folders and creating it because essentially the same.
Sharing folders, we'll say NTFS is security, securing those folders.
Oh, yeah, shadow copies as well.
Okay, shadow copies having protection for those.
So shadow copies, on my stuff, I've been things that might put it say enable or like mess with, and I'm like, I've never seen that thing before.
It's
We have to actually have it turned on for it to work.
on the server.
Assuming those must be like these must be done automatically. In real life, it's not turned on.
And well, first of all, you have to have storage space for it. And the other thing is it's similar to a virtual machine where you're taking snapshots. It's doing it automatically. You can say, I want to do it every hour, every night. But I promise you, when you have that employee that says, I just deleted the wrong file, I could have sworn it was A, but I deleted B, and now I don't have B, and I have to redo it all. And you can say, you know what? It'll take a little while, but maybe if you get some lunch, we can work through it during lunch, and we'll be good, and I'll get it back for you, and little money on the side. And guess what he does? He goes, beep, 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 beep. Finds the copy, finds the last date, last known good, and can go from there. And it does versioning quite well. So if you have somebody editing a copy while it's backing up a copy, it will look at those versions and either keep the most recent or actually save 2 versions. So we talk, okay, so we're talking security. We'll say protection is security. What else? Security is the who, what, where, when, why. Who do I want to access it? How do I want them to access it? What level do I want them to access it? We get into inheritance, something that is implicit or explicitly set up. You could have a manager that says so-and-so is getting fired and I don't want them to have access to anything. You could go straight to that user, or you even have an OU called fired employees. And inside that OU are explicit instructions to say nothing. They cannot do a thing. They can't browse a network. So you could do that. Otherwise, you would go to that user and you could disable. But if you're in a container, we have our explicit and then our implicit that's using inheritance. So shadow copies. This is the other thing with shadow copies is almost always for client machines, not server machines. You should have another backup solution for your servers. Shadow copies is going to make your life much easier for you on the client or workstation side.
You got room on your servers, because most people on their workstations don't have it.
Well, and if you do have enough space, you can also limit the size of it. You can deal with quotas. You can say if it starts to meet this quota, start deleting old files as opposed to new ones. So, or you can say I only want to keep 3 versions, but I want to do the last 3 days. It's 6 o'clock, so every day at 6 o'clock, you're going to go through and set that up. You can even load balance it by saying this department shadow copies will run at 6 o'clock. These guys will run at 7 o'clock. Those guys will run at 8 o'clock, and now you're going to have much more efficiency. And when a computer is saving that shadow copy, the first time it saves it, it's going to take a little bit because it's going to save a lot more information. After that shadow copy is created, all it's doing is saving or shadow copying changes. Now, here's the other thing. And if we go back to old NT, we talked about this the week before, right? We said old NT had 40,000 objects. And Windows 2000 and Active Directory, we can now have a couple billion. When we deal with replication in old NT machines, if I created, or if I had to change James's password, if I changed an attribute, NT would take that whole user and copy it to those other domain controllers. Okay, but if you have a lot of stuff going on, since Windows 2000, if I change the password attribute for James, all that's replicated is that single attribute, just the password. So it can save a lot. All right, so configuring work folders. And when you're talking sharing folders and securing folders, what typically is in them? What kind of stuff are we usually working with? Let's say just as a regular employee, plain Jane on the network, whether you're doing your secretary or accounting, what kind of things, because you said, securing folders, well, are they empty folders? No. What kind of things do we typically want to secure in our server? Finance.
Well, honestly, God, pretty much anything. I have to go by department line.
Okay. So let's say, would you say that there might be varying degrees that you need of security? Okay. And when we're talking about Active Directory and we're talking about security, we're back again. Who can access it? When can they access it? How can they access it? I want so-and-so to be able to read it, and that's it. What's traverse folders?
That's where you can map, like, the black and all the way down. You can get past all of that.
Correct. Or If you've opened up a folder and it's been cached on your machine, if you click over in the Windows Explorer and you click left, sometimes you'll see that folder and you'll see that structure. When you remove traverse folders, that's gone
I think on 16 that's gone by default.
by default. So we have those kind of options. Basically, we can confuse the heck out of ourselves if we want to. It also depends on what you choose. There's two strategies in my personal opinion. Start secure, loosen up as I go, or let them do everything, and as they screw it up, now I'm going to tighten it down. I like the first. Yeah. So if you don't, if you don't need access to it, even though you don't use it, I'm not going to give you access. It's easier for me to know who's in that group as opposed to saying everybody's in it and can read it. I'm going to select those users. So we can control all those different pieces. And then printing, did we talk about printer pooling? We talked about that, right? Like in HP, how they have the big print centers and you can print to a single printer, yet it's many different physical printers, and so we'll kind of review that. All right. So when we talk about permissions, we have two types. Hold on. Outside of policies, when we're talking on a typical network, we have two basic types of permissions we need to deal with. Okay? NTFS, and then just a typical network structure. So, and we've also talked about that. Which one gives us more control? NTFS, yes. In fact, what are the options sort of for NFS?
You've got full control, change, and
Read only, okay? And NTFS permissions, there's several in that list. There's even an option called advanced settings that you can go through, and there's probably 20 or 30 different things that you can assign that particular user. So, file permissions, okay, in NTFS, REFS. REFS is the new one. Remember what that stands for? You're not REFS. You're not vigilant. You might be resilient. Which basically, if we also remember, it talks about how there's a lot more self-protection in the files. A lot less losing data and information. The files is kind of almost like a self-healing, your Wolverine type, where you get hurt, boom. See that little, brought that in. How often can you bring Wolverine into a discussion and have it actually apply?
oh, the actually apply it. I don't know about that.
Healing, self-healing?
Wolverine actually basically is, I mean, except for they named these movies.
Yeah,
They could have put him in Star Trek.
probably. Did you see Logan? Yeah. And Logan. But his child lives on. All right, so, what's that?
Find out, come to find out the one that died in World War II is
Yeah. All right, file permissions. We configure the file permissions at the individual file or the folder. Remember beginning of 2 weeks ago? Remember Agdalip? We take users,
Oh, yeah.
put them into groups, put those groups into domain local groups that we secure. We don't want to secure the global groups. We don't want to secure the users. We're going to put them into domain local resources for the domain, and secure them that way. Do you have to do it that way? No. It is a good strategy. If you've got 10,000 people, 5 layers may not be enough. You may need a bigger pyramid. If you've got 100 users, You don't need something that's that big. Smaller is going to be easier. So it is going to be dependent on what you're doing. So for permissions, similar to AgDelup, we want to go to the file, maybe, but most likely the folder, and deal with the security at the folder level. Now, what happens if I have security enabled or set on a folder on the network, and Travis takes a file from his personal computer, he has access to it, and he copies it and puts it in that folder? Okay? What does that mean, inheritance?
Whatever you have on that drive from the group down to whatever.
Unless it's explicitly denied, or you disable inheritance, which comes from the top down. But if he's taken a file, he can't say, oh, let me move it over here so I can bypass all this stuff. You put it in that folder, you are getting the traits that are above you. Yes. We can grant them or deny. What's the difference between allowing somebody and denying them?
Allow it, well, it depends on which way. Allow them to see the folder, get in the folder. If you deny them, I think you can still see it in some instances.
Unless Traverse or some of those are. But so in some cases, we can go through and not give them access, as opposed to actually deny them access. It's kind of smoke and mirrors. And I had a thought about the difference to use it, and I'm not remembering it now. But there's a time where you want to explicitly deny as opposed to just not include them in it. Yep. The deny, the explicit, and the deny. Okay, so permissions, precedence. Explicitly assigned deny. I go to that bottom folder, go to it, it's denied. That's kind of the. That's what we were just trying to talk about. Security is a big issue. Instead of having to take them out of the group, I could automatically deny them.
So you have, let's say, for instance, we're all in a group, you don't want Ken to have it, you deny him?
I could deny him in a different place, and it's going to override wherever he is.
Well, that's what I mean. So that's what, on like my classroom folder, I gave everyone full control to the blue folder. But I access
And TFS.
Then I did it in inheritance box listed. But up below that, that's where I start denying on their own.
Okay.
As a group level, how would I deny specifically against all access? But in the group, how would I do that? To me, it doesn't make sense. I don't know. Could
In a domain or.
Yeah, let's just say we're all here and we all have our folder, and you guys a group to it, it's full control both sides, but how would you deny him specifically?
So I could go to the folder. If he's added in it, I can actually check deny.
But it's, and we're in a group level, would you add him separately than deny him?
So if you're talking like if he's in a group,
With us.
you could either remove him from the group or create a deny group, or you could actually go to him in that group and deny him specifically within the group, and it'll pass on down. But that kind of changes Microsoft's strategy, right? You don't deal with the user, you deal with the container or the object that they're in. But
That was kind of like my question, like why would you do a deny then?
If, for instance, you're, say, an IT person working on a big number of people, and you have an HR group that none of the internal employees are going to see that information in that.
But if they're not added to it at all, then
If they're an IT, if somebody works in IT in an organization, chances are they can have access to everything unless the services is done.
well, and the other thing is if you have a deep structure, you may not know where else they have access to it.
oh, that's what you thought, that makes sense.
If you deny, it doesn't matter if he's in that group. He could be in group A, B, or C that can see that folder. And if I go to A and deny him, That follows him wherever he goes.
Oh, I was just wondering, like, for a one-on-one basis, why would I do that? But you've been told to that makes sense.
So if on the test, the strategy would be create a group, a deny group, put them in the group that is denied explicit access.
An individual user basis?
You would do it with one person, assuming that later on, if I have to do it, I've already got a group created. Now, that is the Microsoft's strategy. You don't deal with the user individually, you put them into a group. So if you have to deny the group explicitly, you're dealing with the group. In real world, if this doesn't happen very often, you could just go to Josh, the user itself, within the resource, and just deny explicit, and it'll fall wherever. Because they're going to say, well, I want to make sure that he can't, get through this folder because it's a part of marketing too, and I don't want him to come over here and see it. So if you deny, it's going to explicit do it wherever it is. And there's another, and I'm not remembering it now, but there's an example where you would want to outright deny access as opposed to just not put them in the list. And if I just don't include him in the list that has access, he shouldn't have access to it. But if I don't know what other groups he's a membership of, he might have access it through a different group. So if I want to deny explicitly, that will say, I don't have to worry about what group he's in. For that folder, it's out. So explicitly, if I think of something else, I'll let you know. So explicitly deny, explicitly allow, inherit deny, inherit allow. Any questions on inheritance? How far down does inheritance go? Meaning I have a folder, root. Some will go dir, D-I-R, for directory, root dir, whatever it is. So you've got root, and within that you might have, how would you break it down? Locations, so state 1, state 2, state 3. You could say department, HR, marketing, sales. You could base on administrators, accountants, whatever it is. So if I have that root and I come over here and I'm creating marketing and I go, the idea is I want to go to that marketing folder, and at that level I want to set what will be my basic permissions for everybody in that folder. I want to do it up here. Because if I create a project for Kyle, for James, for Travis, for Greg, for Josh, and they're all in this folder, I don't want to have to go to each one. I hopefully have it set up above, haven't removed it or broken the inheritance, and then whoever gets it, another word that we use is propagate. It will propagate on down. Another good reason for a test group, because sometimes you'll sit there and go, there is no way Greg can access that folder, but I am looking at it right now, and somehow he's doing it. So, test groups. All right, so shared folders. What is our most common shared folder type for shared resources? Documents or?
Oh, my bad.
No, I didn't. It wasn't a good question.
Your public one.
There's a variable that we added to a script or to a policy with the users. Variable for their username, right? And so that automatically put whatever their username was, it would substitute username in between those percent, username percent, and it will create that directory. And what kind of things would a user put in there? It depends. Yeah. You could also set up a quota saying, I'm not letting you do more than 100 megs or gigs or whatever you want to. Yeah. So in this case, when you're talking about shared folders, not NTFS, we're talking about shares. I cannot go to file, let's say file accounting and share a file. I cannot right-click on that file and go down and say, let me share it with James. I can only share a folder and the contents of that folder. So when you see the questions, when you see test questions, you always want to look for, is it NTFS, is it REFS, or is it share? That should immediately point you in one direction.
So what instances would a general user, or why would you use REFS over?
You're running Windows 2016.
That's the server side?
That's on the server side, and most of the time NTFS is going to be the same. Or you have partitions that are, what was it, over 2 terabytes? And then you would need to go to the different file system.
That goes in line with GPC, REFS, or like synonymous?
Yes.
Okay.
I would think so.
Okay.
So share the folder, not the file. Everybody, how can I create a folder that nobody can see unless they actually know the path that I give them? Right. Now, can I put the $ after any folder name? Yeah. Do you want to hide everything? No.
Now that's not only on the share, but don't you have permission to do that on the folder itself as well? Or does that happen? Because I've seen them do it where, like, let's say sales $, that's the share, but let's say it's on a physical hard drive. Isn't it sales $, as well?
Not on the folder, just the share to that folder. You can do it that way. You can actually go into, it's not disk management, but when you go into computer management, there's a little folder right there that says shares. You can look through it. It'll show you the shares on the right. It'll show you the hidden shares on the right too.
I don't like the way this thing is to do if I go into server management or whatever, and do share.
That's what I mean, and that's what I've been trying to track lately.
You also deal with shares being created through PowerShell. A lot of companies will create login scripts and logoff scripts dealing with folder shares. Where's the folder? What is being done? And level of access. And you create the script, and when they log on, it sees that script and it goes through it, top to bottom. And as long as they've done it correctly, it's going to map that drive. It's going to do other things. We're not going to deal with it that way as much. We want to deal with it through group policy. Okay? But there are ways you can do it. So we create a hidden share. It's more secure, not a huge thing, but it's basically when I want to share a folder and I don't want everybody to see it, and as long as the other person knows the name of that share, they will be able to get to it. And then our built-in admin shares are automatically have the $ and hidden. Okay, inheritance. We talked about this, blocking inheritance. From the top down, you can block it. You can block the file or the folder itself, and then you can have it propagate down to child. So basically, you can block and have the contents block it as well. If anything, if we've talked about anything, oh, excuse me, my eyes, over the last 2.5 weeks, I would hope that we would all begin to realize how important it is to think this stuff through before you do it. That helps. That helps. But really, you will save so much time by documenting and planning this stuff out. Especially if, now, the people that are doing this, this is where we're talking like Cisco engineers, your Microsoft engineers, you're even getting like your Oracle people, You're getting people who are in exchange, email, third party, proprietary. You're going to get all that input. That's like an Albertsons. That's huge. But even if we're dealing with 100, James is going to go through, maybe with one or two other administrators that he knows can follow along in that discussion and actually provide input. Valuable input, yes. Sometimes having, not that,
I like the guys who think outside the box.
I was going to say Dumas, but sometimes just having somebody just out there kind of helps because they ask a silly question. Who has seen World War Z? Okay? And have you seen it? So the Israelis have this thing called the 11th man or whatever it was. And if everybody got together and came up with one decision, the 11th man had to come up with the opposite fight based on what those 10 were. And that one guy ended up being the 11th man. And it was basically, if this is true, what do? We build walls, we do this, and we do that. And of course, we saw in the movie they were protected, loud,
And then get them up all.
yeah, through a megaphone.
First one of them.
Yeah. So so in this case, James would prefer to design it correctly, hope to design it correctly, or design it in such a way so that he could say, Greg, I'm having you responsible for putting this part of it together. And the term we used last week was delegate. We talked about it more like organizational units. How do I delegate administrators? Well, they're in Idaho, they're in Utah, or they're accountants. And Kyle is responsible for not just Idaho, but just accountants in Idaho. And if he's thought it through, he can tell me immediately that a folder has yes. This folder has deny. Every user is in this. Only certain users are here. And if I'm out there doing it, I can follow along and do it correctly. He does not want to spend 80, 100, however many hours doing everything himself. He might like it. I like part of it because I like to have the control at that level. If it's going to get messed up, it's because I screwed it up. Not that I put my trust in somebody else who screwed it up. But you have to be able to trust. So by designing it more appropriately, that will help us implement it more importantly. So you're also getting this from a programmer background. I'm much more of a process-driven thinker. Drives my family nuts. Hey, the movie we saw was horrible. Well, what movie was it? Oh, it was Point Break. Oh, was it the old one or the new one? Doesn't matter, Dad. Come on. But I ask those questions. We ran out of fuel. Well, where did you run out of gas? Was there a leak? Did you have a gas can? That's how my mind thinks. I do not like it at times because I know it's bothersome. I know I can see the person going, oh, just shut up and let me do this. And I can envision that. And I can say, I obviously talk a lot. And I'm the type of person that I could be buying milk from a guy at the dairy store, and I could probably sit there for 10 minutes and just spit fat and just chew and talk about everything or nothing. And I know as soon as I start that, you hear that my two daughters, here we go again.
I like that growing up where you go out grocery shopping with your mom or your dad, and then they run somebody they know. You're like,
Oh, yeah, a little bit. But I'm aware of it. Everybody says it's a good trait. I think it can be most of the time, but as I get older, I am much more aware of it. Because I know when I start getting into that, I can even tell I'm doing it right now. I start to repeat things. I say it one way, and then I'll say the same thing a little bit differently. And then I'll say it a little bit differently. And I just notice I just did that. But I don't notice it while it's doing it. But lately I have been, see, and here I go again. Lately, I'm much more aware of it.
Wait till you hear it back on YouTube. And, wow, 6 times?
Yeah. I have finally kind of got rid of the between every sentence. Sometimes I still do it. All right, so one of the things, design it properly. Microsoft, white papers, other companies, past experience, contractors, consultants, friends, previous employees, similar companies, other health insurance, whatever it may be. In some cases, government is going to require certain standards that have to be met. State, HIPAA, those kind of things have to do it a certain way.
Who actually comes in from that audit your company? Typically, is it a third party? Is it actually them? Is it you sending it back to them? Or is it
As far as HIPAA and stuff like that goes, there are actually agencies that will hire out.
I was talking to like general, whether it's stocks, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's better 12 of those things.
Stock audit we've been through regularly, but what we're actually starting to look for now is called HITRUST.
So usually with groups like that, you have to present a plan. And that plan is approved or denied or asked for improvement. And then based on that plan being implemented, sometimes they will want to make sure that it was implemented the way that you say it was. Sometimes they will have somebody in their own agency. Sometimes it's a contractor that's on behalf of them. But at that level, they're going to go through and make sure you're following the regulations. Sometimes you get forensic people in there if it's to that point. All right, so inheritance, propagation, explicit, implicit. When combining your file and folder, some of this is personal choice, but typically it's going to be, I provide access to the share and I lock it down with NTFS.
So why would you do like full control or modify?
Full control of the share.
Yeah, so why would you use, I know there's 3, there's read, I think modify.
Read only, modify, full
So
control.
what would be the difference in why you would do modify it versus full control back?
Modify doesn't, I believe modify does not let you work with other people's objects. Correct?
Yeah, so I think you can't like do permissions on that.
So others. And so, but I can change my file with modify because I'm the creator owner. Inheritance would propagate down. What else? Read only, obviously you can't edit it at all. You can just see it. Hidden or not. Now I'm not getting into the advanced NTFS. All the others.
Do you know what with that?
Test-wise, yes. Real world, again, your Albertsons, those groups, yes, but most of the part, no.
Some of the stuff I wanted to do VCO live, mission live, and I watched YouTube videos, even though advertisements, they made me go to the advanced portions, and when you see that stuff, I think you click on something to edit, and like pops the full view of how you want to do this folder, subfolder, files below it, or this folder over there.
Sure.
Stuff, so
Yeah.
that's why I was like, okay.
And most of the time you can do it in several layers. I can do it at the file or folder. I can do it through inheritance. I could do it through scripting. I could do it through PowerShell. And I could also have group policy do it. I could have group policy do it to the computer, like we talked about. So whoever sits there, they get it. Or I can apply it to the user. So wherever that user goes, they get it. You can do both.
What takes prior first on that
Computer over the user.
Okay.
Because the computer,
I think we talked about
we did a little bit, but just logically, the computer can start up and do things without knowing who's logged into it. So I may want to disable certain things on that computer, certain applications, regardless of who sits down at it. I could then go into the user and give, if he's an administrator, I could actually reassign other permissions, because the last one read is the last one applied. So if I were to put yes to the computer policy and no to the user policy, the computer policy starts up, yes it does it, the user logs in, goes through it, no. And it will go from top down through those GPOs. And in the next class, you get a lot more into the design part of it. It's a wonderfully painful experience.
Well, I really love this idea. I'm sure that's probably longer route or maybe
Yep. My simple answer, if somebody says, can I do this on my network or to my user or computer? Yes. If I can't script it, I almost guarantee there's a policy that can set or lock or allow or disallow. I may not know where it is. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of settings. Why would you not want somebody to change their time on the computer? There's a policy that says no. In fact, there's a policy that says I don't even want it there. In fact, there's a policy that says I don't even want you to be able to go down into the taskbar and do things.
Yeah, that's what our district has. You can't use nothing in the bottom right corner.
Right click.
Yeah.
I've done that.
Now, we also will get into, there's another policy, not a GPO, but it is the local server policy. And we'll see that. I don't know if we'll get to that this class or next.
You want to hear the most ridiculous policy ever? Can't get into your command prompt. You want to know why?
Why?
Because they didn't disable PowerShell.
You know you can get a command prompt.
You can do anything with PowerShell you can do with command prompt.
Oh, much more.
Yeah, correct.
So they disabled command prompt, but not
Not
PowerShell. So that was either a mistake or lack of knowledge.
Lack of
PowerShell,
vision.
some of the stuff in PowerShell you still have to add the access.
Right, no, I understand that. But the thing is that they went to all the trouble to disable command prompt, but not PowerShell.
So that's lack of knowledge, experience, or design.
And not the run command.
Well, I've been learning some stuff. Right? Well, fair enough.
You can do task manager, do the run command.
Well, that's why, I don't know, it's like, it's kind of a catch-22, because I like the USB commands on startup, but also I don't want the USB commands on top of the disk or whatever, or just using it.
You get that geek or nerd that's pissed off or just, oh, look what I can do. Or like you, the code guy coming in and the CEO doesn't know who that is. If I give him a little bit, lock it down and open it up as you need to go. So if I am dealing with the share and the user, or NTFS, if Kyle is not granted access to the share, it doesn't matter what I do with NTFS. So Kyle has to have access to the share in order for me to lock it down and secure it with NTFS, right? The user must have both file system and shared permission, otherwise you'll be denied access. My personal small business, small office theory is I like to go share, full control, and use NTFS as I go. Because for me, and not that this happens all the time, but for me to separate and know that that share is wide open, and all I'm really having to deal with now is securing it through NTFS. Microsoft would probably say, don't give them the access that they don't need to. If they don't need to change the file, don't give them full control, or lock it down based on read-only, or the take ownership. But for me, it is easier to know that whatever the share is, the share has full control, and then I control access through NTFS. Access-based enumeration. So we talked about the traverse folders. This was sometimes a problem where people could see cached items, or even though they would click on it, it might not give them access. A lot of times they could see it. So in 2012, that's gone. So built into 2012, available.
Basic enumeration is defined as what, though?
Say that again.
Saying, like, if you have access, like, they basically saying, like, I have to give you access, right? Isn't that kind of like an ACL in a sense?
Access control list, yeah. But we're getting down to
That thing's a
not
visibility.
accessing the share, but even if it's a hidden share and they know the path, they wouldn't be able to see it.
Because so we just did that lab, so at one point in time I saw it was there, then they have you go and edit the share, enable that, and then you go back in and boop,
Yep.
down.
I
The part thing about the file conversion is even though you legit have access to that path, you still can't get there by shortcut. You have to go the long route.
because it's whatever's the most control. I have used this as a father because when certain kids are looking or going through different folders on the computer, unless they literally close out of the folder structure, I can almost always see where certain things might be. And as a father, somebody's grounded or not. I actually haven't had really problems with it, but I know that's one place. What were they doing on the computer? When I walked in, did they put the monitor down? And they're only allowed in the family room, and it has to be open so somebody else could see it, kind of a thing.
Do you have like a box or anything like a proxy name?
Not now, but I have. I had a software. Well, I had a Sonic Wall that I had, and then it burned up.
Most firewalls will tell you again.
It will, but you can also run packet sniffing software and other things on your network. I have not done that lately, but I have in the past.
I was like wondering like if you went in there and edit the proxy like this, if they search for this, and deny it.
Or I could say,
You sit there and
Yeah.
not to be like a religious funny, but like you sit there and like what do you want to do?
Yeah.
They're rerouting the thing that you made it said you need to find Jesus, stuff like that. Is that something funny?
So I'm not an Apple guy. I am, but I don't have Apple. Anyway, it's a long story. My brother-in-law is an Apple nut, and he's got the iHome, he's got the iPhone, so he's got the home TV, whatever it's called now, and he can set it up so that he will get a notification on his phone anytime somebody searches on his internet access for anything that he deems inappropriate or he doesn't want to. So, I wanted to utilize some of his bandwidth. And there was a good movie I wanted to watch. I tried. Window completely X denied. You do not have access to this. Well, maybe the site's down. Tried it again. He didn't tell me, but the next day he's like, you know that I can do it. I'm like, I figured there was something. He goes, it's real easy. So in Apple, it's just built into it. You can go to a page and you can open, lock, you can set up notifications to your phone, to your email, text.
What's that airport thing? they
Yep.
have?
The airport's a wireless router that does it, but I'm thinking of the home, like the Roku box, the Roku.
They're streaming.
Yeah, but they also have a hardware box that connects to it.
Are you trying to do like a Kodi thing?
No,
An app where it goes out. Are you like looking at that kind of stuff?
No.
Or- okay, so it's a streaming.
it's just a torrent.
Oh.
And because of the request I was making, there was nothing inappropriate about the text or the text that I was searching.
But was it a download or a stream?
Yes,
Well, because
Down.
Like a stream, I could see
Down.
the download that,
and it was to my own device
but it's on his network.
on his home Wi-Fi, cable internet, 150 download, and
Really, with the download accountability laws the way they are, every network should have that.
as a parent, and his kids are young, but as a parent, knowing that I can be a computer idiot, but if I can read instructions, that there are easy instructions for me to protect my kids. And it's not that my kids go out and do things or my employees go out and do things on purpose, but you don't want to give them the path of least resistance. Oh, I didn't mean to search for that. Oh, she's gorgeous, or whatever it is. You don't want to create that temptation. I wasn't looking at you. I was.
What about me over here on your Wi-Fi?
Yeah?
Would you want someone to come in your business and you get Wi-Fi to start going to?
No.
My firm got a cease and desist letter from Tony.
Oh.
Someone's down their guest Wi-Fi and start downloading
Yeah.
from
I believe it. I believe it. And when I get on some of those Wi-Fis, I always get curious. What did they do? How's it set up? Sometimes it's a default password, and I've had 2 people that I know and said, just so you know, I could very easily get into your Wi-Fi, and in one of those cases, I actually printed a document to the printer in the back room. And they, yeah, whatever it was good. Are you done? Oh. All right. So go home, we'll finish this. I believe this class finishes Wednesday. But like I said, if I trim some stuff in this, I know that we will cover it. So don't feel bad about missing it. Some of it gets very repetitive too. And the next class, it gets into that design thinking much more. Have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. You bet. Have a great night.